Welcome back to Learning with Merit. Today we are going to talk about how we can build our very own PC. So let's go and look at what we're going to cover. So the first thing we're going to look at is the difference between hardware versus software. Then we're going to look at some sites with a PC builder tool. Then we're going to start working on building our own PC with one of those tools. We're going to look at these major hardware components, including your motherboard, CPU, memory, GPU, and all of those listed there. We'll also look at some software components, but mainly just the operating system. You may be familiar with the Windows operating system and the Mac operating system, but a lesser known OS is Linux. We'll look at the different options there. So first things first, let's take a look at our hardware versus software. So if we come down here, we'll see that hardware is the physical parts of a computer. That means like the motherboard, the CPU, all of these types of things. And then our software are the programs that are used by that computer. So there's a lot of different types of software, but the software we're going to look at today is specifically the operating system, which is our general purpose software for doing lots and lots of different things. Let's go take a look at some sites with a PC builder tool. So come down here, I've already got a few up and ready to go. Here's one, this is called Micro Center, and they actually have physical locations in a lot of places. Unfortunately, where we're at, there are not a lot of micro centers, but they are around, and they're a great place to go if you want to go in to a store and actually look at all of the different components. And they, of course, have a PC builder tool. If we come up here and we look through all of their stuff, right, they've got things from like Apple, and they've got different little desktop computer, they've got everything you could possibly want to look through. But if we look up here at products, we'll see PC builders, and then there's build a custom PC. And you could pick with Intel or with AMD, but you don't know the difference yet. So we're going to go to pick a custom PC builder here. So basically, it has all of the places for all of your components, and a lot of these PC builders will try to help you make sure that everything is compatible, because it's not as simple as just buying each of the components from whatever component you want. You have to make sure that these devices actually are compatible with each other in order to use them. So of course we can take a look through all of here, including our peripherals. So these are all our extra things like keyboards, mice, speakers, headsets, monitors. Okay. Any of our networking tools we may need, like a router, for example, printers, that type of stuff. We also have some accessories that go with that, just to make it look cool and maybe protect it from things like surges and power outages. So this is basically what a PC builder will look like, and if you really want to use this PC builder, you're free to. This is not the one I'm going to show you today, though. I'm going to show you the one that I use to build my PC, which is Newegg here. So Newegg is another place where you can build your PC. They have a lot of components on here. And of course there are other websites that will allow you to build your PC, and maybe you'll find one you like better. But let's just use this one today because it's one I'm very familiar with, and it's fairly easy for beginners to get started with. So first we've got to find where is their PC builder. Well, if you look right up here at the top, you will see it says PC builder right in here. So we're going to click PC builder. Right, and it says building your own custom PC starts here. Of course, they do have something like build with AI. We're probably going to skip that for right now. They do give you some things to start with, talking about like prices. So sub 1200. Sub 2000, over 2000. These are the different sort of areas, but these are like they have pre-built, and then they have Intel versus AMD. Now this is a good place to start. Intel versus AMD. What is the difference? Why do you see the difference? Well, Intel and AMD are both CPU makers. They build those central processing units, those types of chips. And so that is the first thing you have to decide, because the CPU and the motherboard go directly together. And you need either an Intel CPU motherboard or you need an AMD CPU motherboard. So let's look at our central processing unit first. So we're going to click right here, and it's going to help us keep track of what we're doing. So let's click on that. So here it brings us to this page. We have over here on the right, we have this little sidebar that will allow us to see what we're picking. And of course, we're going to pick something for each of these. I'm not going to do too much in the way of looking, but you'll see right now we have all these different options for Intel versus AMD versus, Intel versus AMD. That's pretty much all there is. There really are no other major chip makers that are available. So you need to decide which one you want. For example, I picked an AMD for mine, but Intel is also an extremely good chip maker. So it just depends on what you think. And I'm going to leave a little bit of that research to you, which one of these might be best. For now, I'm just going to pick whatever the first one that pops up is, right? And it will show you some little overview things and talk about maybe some games. And of course, you can tell that's a CPU where it's sitting right there. You can look at the specs for it, and you can see all kinds of things like the number of cores, number of threads, all things that maybe we're not going to go over in this class, but will be very useful to know if you're building your computer to be the best gaming PC possible. I usually suggest that you look at the actual page for it because it gives you some good pictures and maybe even some more information than you would just looking at their little overview there. Okay, so we've picked one here. Let's go to select. And now this determines pretty much everything else we're going to look at, because now I'm looking for a motherboard. So I'm going to click on motherboard here. Now the thing is all of these motherboards now have to be compatible with an AMD CPU. Now the good thing is that with a lot of these PC builders, they will check, hey, you're using an AMD CPU. We're going to give you the options for an AMD motherboard. So you could look through here. Again, same sort of thing. I'm going to leave this up to you to search and see which one you think might be the best, but I'm just going to click the first one that pops up here. This is not unlike the one that I actually ended up using. There are, of course, some differences. Well, I'll go ahead and click select there as well. So now we're putting it together, right? We now have a CPU and a motherboard. Now we need some RAM. We need some memory. So we're going to go and find that. In general, the more memory, the better, but you don't need to load up on memory. I would say that unless you're doing something specific, mostly all you need is 16 gigabytes. But you can see here in module, right? You can see it's a total of 32 gigabytes, which is two 16 gigabyte sticks, right? And you can, of course, search by, how much you want and, different types of things like how fast it is, that sort of thing. All right. And like in general, DDR4 versus DDR5, like as the number goes up, it's usually better, but of course also more expensive. And you may not even get any more performance out of it depending on what you're doing. So again, I'm just going to pick the first thing that pops up here. I'm going to go with 32 gigs. That's actually what I got for mine, not these specific ones, but I did get 32 gigabytes for my PC, and that's because I wanted the 32 gigabytes, but didn't really think that I needed any more than that. Now we're going to look at video cards. So you don't actually have to have a video card. The CPU will do your integrated graphics, but if you plan on doing anything very graphically intensive, like playing some very good-looking video games or doing any 3D modeling or video editing or these types of things, a good graphics card will save you a lot of time, but they can be expensive. In fact, video cards are probably one of the most expensive parts in building a PC. So sometimes people will build the PC and then come back get the video card later because they are so expensive. So let's look at our graphics card here. You will see a lot of people. NVIDIA is a very big maker of graphics cards. Of course, you'll see there's lots of different brands here, but they actually don't have that much to do with the specific graphics card. Most of these are going to be an NVIDIA graphics card. AMD does make graphics cards as well, I believe. So anyway, you can look through those. In general, right, like a 4070 is going to be a very good graphics card for the most part, and it's very new for that. And of course, I'm going to leave it up to you to look at some of the more details for this because it's not really in the scope of what we're doing in our class here. So I'm going to click on that one, and that's going to be my first one. Of course, that was $600, and that's arguably very cheap for a graphics card. They're very expensive. They've actually come down in price recently, but they're still, as you can see, some of them are even close to things like $2,000, which can be very, very expensive. All right, now we need a pretty case. A case is mostly about helping with thermal control, so how hot it gets, but it's also about looking cool. So this is really a personal style type thing. You want a relatively cheap case that will protect your stuff, but they've also got some really cool looking cases like something like this. Of course, that's really cool. I wouldn't mind having something like that myself, maybe in a different color, but it's a very cool looking case. So I'm gonna go ahead and select that one. So it's coming together. We now have a CPU, motherboard, some memory. We have video cards. We can have, in most cases, we can have up to 4 sticks. So we could add another set of those. And now we have 64 gigabytes of memory if we wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and set that back down. Now, we need a power supply. This is an important part, especially whenever you're actually building the PC, because you want to make sure that you have a high enough wattage on your power supply. This one's 1,000 watts, that one's 850. In general, if you can get away with a little bit higher wattage than what you actually need, that allows you to potentially upgrade in the future and save you in the long run. I'm going to go with 1,000 watts on this one, but of course, in a lot of times, you can get away with a smaller wattage and save yourself a little bit of money there. So I'm going to select that one. Right, now one of the cool things about this is now I wouldn't just trust them, but they are in general making sure all of this stuff is compatible in one way or another. But I do recommend that if you decide to build your own, that you check whether or not it is actually compatible. Now, storage options wise, they provide us with hard drive and solid state drive types. We want a solid state drive. They are better than the hard drives. Now, the difference here is if you're going to use a solid state drive, that's really good for putting your operating system on because you want it to run fast. So something like this 2 terabyte SSD here from Samsung, or a 1 terabyte. These are both really good options. Of course, the big difference is price. It depends on your storage needs. But 1 terabyte is probably good for most people, and you might even be able to get away with 500 gigabytes, even depending on what you're doing. I'm going to go with the little cheaper option this time. Just go with the 1 terabyte and select that. All right, now we need something to cool our CPU, and there are a lot of different options on this depending on what you want to go with. Actually, before we do that, let's go back. Let's talk about the other option, the hard disk drive. So you may want to also add a hard drive, and there are reasons for this. Hard drives are spinning hard disk drives. They're actually cheaper. They're slower whenever you use them, but the truth is that they're only really slower whenever you're dealing with something like at least slower in the sense that you can tell. They're slower than the SSDs, but whenever you're storing a large amount of data, they're also cheaper. And if you're not running your operating system off of them, they're pretty fast. I mean, I have some like this, and it's pretty much impossible to tell that there's much difference in the speed between accessing the SSD and accessing the hard drive. And I have some, old, not very good hard drives. So you might also want to add one of these. For example, if you're going to be gaming, you might want to store all of your games on something like this right here, this 14 terabyte drive, and it'll keep all of your games downloaded and ready to go at any time. And then you can leave all of the other storage space for all kinds of stuff for your operating system and hardware and stuff like that. I personally have 2 SSDs, one for a Windows operating system and one for a Linux operating system, and I can run both of them on the same computer hardware. And I just chose, rather than trying to basically partition my drive, which means give this part to Windows, this part to Linux, I just decided to have 2 separate drives, and that's perfectly reasonable. And then I have extra drives like this. I don't have a 14 terabyte one, but it's something like this. I have a drive like that to store video games and things like that on. So I'll add that on there too. So now I have both of those. Now back to the CPU cooler. So CPU cooler wise, we have the fan and heatsink, and the water cooler kit. Of course, you can choose which one you want. In general, if you're going to be producing a lot of heat, you want something like a water cooler, but a fan and heatsink are pretty good these days. So I'm going to click on fan and heatsink because that's more of the budget option. You will see lots of different coolers that you can pick from. You might pick something like this, or the Be Quiet. I like the Be Quiets. I think they look cool, so I might select that. Then we got to look at an operating system. So if we click over here on operating system, really all that they're going to provide option-wise is going to be Microsoft Windows. So if you're wanting to get Windows and you want to get a license for Windows, you can do that. You can click one of these here. All right, and for most of us, it's just going to be something like Windows 11 Home. I personally prefer Windows 11 Pro, so that's something that you might get. Of course, that's nearly $200 to get a product key for that. So it's very expensive. So maybe you don't want to run Windows. You don't want to have that operating system on here. And they're not going to let you run Mac on anything that isn't, created by Apple. So what is our other option? Well, if we come up here, whoops, my AdBlock Plus has been updated. But if we go up here, we want to see Linux distros. These are all of the Linux distributions. There are a huge number of them. Basically, they are all based on what we call the Linux kernel, and they all are operating systems that are excellent, okay, for the most part. Some of them are designed for more specific things, but in general, you can use any of these totally free, and they're great operating systems. Ones that I would recommend for beginners is Ubuntu. Ubuntu is going to be very beginner friendly for the most part, but I mostly prefer Linux Mint. And you can see it's not, if we take a look at the pictures, it's not unlike Windows when you look at Linux Mint. And that's why I think Linux Mint is a great one for beginners. So if you were interested in doing that, you could also just skip the pay the $200 and learn how to use Linux, and your life will be pretty cool. So come back here to this. Now we need to pick some accessories, and I'm going to leave this mostly up to you. I'm not going to go and pick any accessories for me, but there are a huge number of different accessories and peripherals that are on here that you may want to pick. There are some ones that you have to have, though, if you plan on using the computer, like actually being able to interact with it. You probably want a monitor so that you can see the display, see what the computer outputs. Right? You might want a keyboard. Doesn't have to be a gaming keyboard, but you probably want a keyboard so that you can type on it. And you probably at least want a mouse, right? So that you can move around and click on things. Now, the monitor, the keyboard, and the mouse you have to have pretty much in order to interact with it, unless you're going to interact with it somewhere else. But the rest of this stuff is all up to you. You can go through and pick any of the things that you want. The goal is to build your own computer here, and sort of your dream computer. You can go as expensive as you want. Obviously, you're probably not going to buy it right now, but in the future, maybe you might be able to. And this one, just picking the random stuff that showed up, ended up being about $2,000. So we looked at all those different little things. We even talked a little bit about Windows versus Mac versus Linux. And now you know exactly where to go and how to build your own personal computer. I appreciate your attention, and thanks for watching Learning with Merit.